Hello! Welcome to another episode of Nature Walks with Gabe. That's me. Today we have come to Lynde Shores Conservation Area here in Whitby, Ontario. We're going to be looking for birds primarily, since as you can see it's winter time, and so the nature that is available for us to see is very different than the nature you can see in the summertime. Most of the trees have lost their leaves and are sleeping for the winter. A lot of the animals, particularly invertebrates and reptiles and amphibians, a lot of mammals are sleeping for the winter, but the birds will still be awake, and there'll still be maybe some mammals we see too. So that's what we'll be looking for. This is a particularly good place to come if you want to feed perching birds out of your hand. We're talking about that and seeing some of the best species to interact with as we go along today. So thanks for joining us. Let's go learn. Of course, it's important, whenever you're walking along trails, to be respectful and share the path. Pardon me. Pass on the right-hand side, of course. Here in North America, we have a special group of birds that are very well known across the world today, but most people don't think of as being a North American specialty. But there's two wild ones behind me right now in the bush. These are wild turkeys. They existed all across eastern North America in times past. They were hunted and lost a lot of their home, so they were greatly reduced through the 1800s and early 1900s, but they've made quite a comeback in the last 50 to 60 years. They're ground birds, so people often wonder, can turkeys even fly? They can actually fly very strongly, but not very far. So they'll fly up into the trees to sleep at night, or it's a little bit safer than resting on the ground. But they spend most of their time on the ground looking for food. These guys do not migrate, unlike a lot of the waterfowl. They live here all year round, and they're really good at using their big, strong feet to dig through the snow to look for food. Wild turkeys use human paths, deer paths, whatever they can find to navigate through the snow in the woods here. You can see they're really good at moving around low to the ground, getting through and diving through bushes and things, but so they're really good at navigating through thick woods or more open woods like this. You can always tell a wild turkey by its size, by this weird little beard they have sticking out halfway down the body, and by the naked head. Though the baby turkeys, which are called poults, start with feathers on their heads when they hatch, they lose them as they age. That circle behind the turkey's eye is actually its eardrum, just like we have, but ours are protected inside our heads. Male wild turkeys also have large spurs on the back of their legs, which they'll use to fight each other to impress the females and scare other rival males away. Males are a lot bigger than the females, and they will do these little displays. Think of like a peacock putting up its tail. The males will do that same kind of thing to try to attract the attention of the females. But obviously their tail's not as big and as fancy as a peacock, but it's the same basic idea, and it does have a nice fan with different colors on it, and they'll kind of try to outdo each other with displaying just so that the females will come have babies with them. Technically, all the different fleshy bits around a turkey's head are called caruncles. What a great word, caruncles. But some of these caruncles located in specific spots have specific names. For example, the dewlap is between the chin and the neck. But the bits around the side and the back of the neck where it meets the feathers are just called caruncles. You've probably also noticed this weird dangly bit hanging over the turkey's beak. This is called, get this, the snood. The snood! This is a super weird thing, guys. So the turkey can actually control it a little bit, and males at least can pump it full of blood so that it expands and gets longer when they're in the middle of trying to show off to a female. And apparently it works. Female turkeys will consistently choose males with longer snoods and more caruncles than similar males. Scientists have found that male turkeys with longer snoods and other caruncles are consistently stronger than other males too when it comes to fighting off disease. These seem to be an honest indicator of the fitness of these males. You'll also notice that we're not trying to feed the Canada geese or wild turkeys that were present on this day.
There's a big discussion in naturalist and conservationist circles around feeding wildlife in any situation, and there are specific rules that Lynde shores against feeding anything other than songbirds and woodpeckers. I just think it's generally a good idea to keep feeding animals only to small birds. We'll talk about that another time.
Wild turkeys. It's really cool. I've never really seen this before, but I'm sure they do it all the time and I just didn't notice. These sparrows. Earlier the turkeys had displaced these guys, and some people walked by and displaced them, and I've never seen this quite before, because usually I think of these birds as just flying away when people come, but they didn't fly very far at all. They were just hiding and staying perfectly still here in the bushes until everyone went past, and now they come back out.
Sparrows are ground-feeding birds, meaning they look first to the ground or flat surfaces to find food, rather than in the branches of trees or bushes. And they're really taking advantage of the seeds and nuts that people have dropped intentionally or otherwise here along the path. American tree sparrows are the ones that have rusty brown on the top of their heads and back and wings, gray bodies, and a black spot in the middle of their chest here.
American tree sparrows spend the summer up in the boreal forest, further north in Ontario and Quebec, and then they fly south to this area where the snow is less and there's more mixed forests and more resources for them to eat during the winter, more seeds and stuff. You can see they'll look for paths or open areas that other animals, including people, have opened up to look for seeds or other things that have fallen down on the ground. They'll also frequent bird feeders if people have them around their homes or in their neighborhood.
Another species of sparrow is also here, the dark-eyed junco. These are the ones with gray on top and white underneath. And now it's time for Lessons in Hand-Feeding Birds with Gabe.
Most of our native birds will fly south for the winter. It's hard for them to find the food they need to survive when there's snow covering the ground. So many of them are dependent on eating small insects or seeds. But some are really good at finding ways to survive by practicing nuts or finding bugs underneath the bark of trees. Some of them will even cache food, meaning that they'll store it for later in little cracks in the bark or other places they can find it.
Some of these birds have learned that humans can be a great source of food and are even brave enough to take food from your hand if you offer them the right stuff.
You can feed different things. Seeds or small nuts like peanuts or sunflower seeds are great options for feeding perching birds. There are certain birds that are more likely to come and feed out of your hand than others. By far, the bird you're most likely to have come to your hand is a black-capped chickadee, like the ones we're hearing in this part of the woods right now, and who hopefully will be coming to receive food for us before too long. For some reason, these guys just seem to be the bravest of all the little perching birds. Hold your hand as flat as you can. Try to stay as still as you can. Ideally, put your hand out towards or somewhat close to a nice, easy perch for them to sit on so they can land close to you, check you out, decide what they're thinking, and then come to your hand. And ideally as well, which I'm not doing very good of right now, be as quiet as you can and try to stay nice and still. That shows to them that you're not being threatening, because these birds are tiny, a tiny fraction of our size, and even though they're faster than you and you're not likely to be able to actually catch one, please don't try to catch one. They don't know that necessarily. They are intimidated by us because we're so much bigger. So show to them in every way that you can that you are here to feed them and not to hurt them. And you're more likely to have them come to your head. Watch them use that sharp little beak to tear apart that sunflower seed. In some places, these chickadees are far more confident than others. I'm very used to being fed. But there are populations all over southern Ontario of chickadees that will eat out of your hand like this. It's possible even that in your own backyard, if you're very patient and willing to sit for a long time, you could train chickadees to come to your hand too. There are a few other species that might come to your hand. If you're lucky. That was a white-breasted nuthatch. Female, you could tell because she had a paler top to her head. Females are gray on the top of their head. Males have very dark White-breasted nuthatches, like chickadees, are noisy and pretty bold little birds, and they cache food away for later eating. In the winter, nuthatches and chickadees will often look for food together in groups, with other species potentially tagging along too. One of the most likely to join in these groups is our old friend, the Downy Woodpecker. The Downy Woodpecker, like chickadees and nuthatches, is a year-round resident here in southern Ontario. And their diet is pretty similar to that of chickadees and nuthatches, though they may go about getting their food differently. And this leads me to hope that maybe, just maybe, that's the first time woodpeckers have landed on my head. As a final moment of delight for this episode, as we were heading back to the parking lot, we saw a squirrel tail sticking out of a hole high in a tree. My guess would be that the squirrel is probably fine. It's just a little bit too lazy to bring its tail completely inside of the hole. Thank you everyone for joining me on another Nature Walk with Gabe. You got to watch me feed a Downy Woodpecker from my hand for the very first time, which was amazing. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to find joy and wonder in your everyday. We'll see you next time. Never gets old.
Lord Jesus, thank you for this day, this wonderful creation you've made.
Good friends to share them with your care over all these things. Amen.